My neighbor has lived in the same building for 50 years, but he looks 30. I discovered his secret. I moved into this apartment 5 years ago. It's a typical 9-story building on the outskirts, a 1975 panel house. I bought a cheap two-room apartment on the 5th floor and did the renovations myself. I live alone and work remotely as a programmer. I'm 32 years old. I didn't really interact with my neighbors. On the left is Vera Ivanovna, a grandmother. On the right is a young family with 2 children. Noisy downstairs, quiet upstairs. A typical building, but one neighbor stood out. He lived across the hall, in apartment number 48. Andrei Viktorovich, a man of about 30, tall, thin, always neatly dressed. Dark hair, clean-shaven, pleasant face. He greeted them politely but stiffly. He never lingered to chat, always in a hurry. I tried to get to know them better several times, offering to help with something, inviting them over for tea. He politely declined, citing his busy schedule. He didn't take offense, deciding he was an introvert like me. Everything changed 6 months ago. One evening, I stopped by Grandma Vera's to take some groceries. She asked me to buy bread and milk, as she couldn't walk very well anymore. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea. We got to talking. She asked how things were, if it was noisy. I said everything was fine, the neighbors were quiet. Do you talk to Andrei Viktorovich? She asked. We just say hello. He's not very talkative. Grandma Vera nodded, paused, then quietly said, he's strange. I've lived in this house for 45 years, ever since we moved in. Andrei Viktorovich also moved in then, in 75. He was about 25. A young man, handsome. I remember him moving in with his parents. Then his parents died, and he was left alone. And here he is, still living here. I didn't understand. How can it be still? He must be at least 75 by now. Grandma looked at me seriously. He must be. But look at him. How old does he look? Well, 30, 35. Exactly. I'm already an old woman, 82. And he looks the same as he did 50 years ago. His hair hasn't turned gray. There are no wrinkles. His back is straight, as if time has stood still for him. He laughed. Vera Ivanovna, maybe you're confused. Maybe this is his son or nephew. She shook her head. No, Pavel. It's Tim. He still has the same nameplate on his door, Sokolov.V. The same one he had in 75. I remember. He hasn't changed. Not at all. He finished his tea, thanked his grandmother, and returned to his room. He sat down at the computer but couldn't concentrate on work. I thought about her words. Could it really be true? Could my neighbor really never age? The next day, I met him in the entryway. I took a closer look. His face was youthful, his skin smooth, no signs of aging. His gait was light, his movements quick. He noticed my gaze, nodded, and passed by. I decided to check. I went to the management company, posing as a relative, and said I needed to clarify my information for an inheritance. The secretary, without really paying attention, showed me the database on the screen. It said, Sokolov Andrei Viktorovich, born in 1950, registered there since 1975, owner. So, my grandmother was right. He was 75, but he looked 30. I started watching him, not obsessively, just paying attention to his routine. He left late at night, around 11, and returned in the early morning, around 5 or 6. Where he went was unclear. He wasn't home during the day, and the lights were off. He lived alone, with no guests. One night, around 2 o'clock, I heard footsteps on the landing. I looked through the peephole. Andrei Viktorovich was standing at his door, unlocking it. His face was strange, tired, haggard, as if he'd run a marathon. I entered the apartment and closed the door. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. He looked fresh, alert, younger than usual, as if he'd aged a few years. I decided to talk to the other old-timers in the building. I went up to the 9th floor and knocked on Grandfather Fyodor's door. He'd lived here since it was built. He's 90 years old. Grandfather Fyodor invited me into the kitchen, poured tea, and asked about Andrei Viktorovich from apartment 48. The old man frowned. Sokolov, a strange guy. I remember him when he was young. He moved in with his parents in 75. Then his parents died in the 80s. He was left alone, and he's still living here. He doesn't age at all. Why do you think that is? Grandfather Fyodor paused, taking a drag on his cigarette. I don't know, but I heard conversations. They said he goes somewhere at night, to the old part of town where the cemetery used to be. He went there regularly, once a month, and he came back refreshed as if he'd just come from a resort. What does he do there? I don't know for sure. but people said strange things, that he somehow connected to the dead, to their memories. I returned to my room, sat down, and thought, connected to the dead, what does that mean? I decided to follow him. The following Friday, when he left at 11 o'clock, I got ready. I picked up my phone, turned on geolocation, and sent a message to a friend, if anything happens, I'm in the old park, and I followed him down, keeping my distance. He walked quickly, confidently, as if he knew the way by heart. We walked through the entire neighborhood and came to the old part of town. There used to be a cemetery there, but it was closed about 30 years ago and moved to the outskirts. Now there's a park there. Andrei Viktorovich turned into the park and followed a path deeper into the park. He followed, hiding behind the trees. He reached the center of the park where an old chapel stood. A small stone building, abandoned, its doors boarded up. He approached the chapel, looked around, took out his key, unlocked the door, and went inside. He closed the door behind him. He waited a minute, then walked closer, peering through a crack between the boards. The dim light of candles glowed inside. Andrei Viktorovich stood in the middle of the chapel before an altar of some sort, on which lay old photographs, many photographs, black and white, yellowed with age. He picked up one photograph, looked at it for a long moment, then brought it to his lips and inhaled, deeply as if sucking in air. The photograph darkened in his hands, the image vanished, as if it had faded in a second. The paper became brittle, as if burned, crumbling into ash when he opened his fingers. Andrei Viktorovich straightened up. His face had changed. It had become younger, fresher. A flush had appeared on his cheeks. He took another photograph and repeated the same thing. He inhaled, and the photograph turned black and crumbled. He stood there, paralyzed with horror. What was this? Was he feeding on photographs, on people's memories? Andrei Viktorovich did this several more times. With each photograph, he visibly grew younger. By the end of the ritual, he looked about 25. He collected the ashes from the photographs, poured them into a small bag, and tucked it in his pocket. He blew out the candles, left the chapel, and locked the door. He hid behind a tree, holding his breath. He passed by without noticing and walked back toward the house. He remained standing in the darkness of the park, trying to comprehend what he had seen. He was feeding on memories, photographs of dead people. He takes their images, their memories end, and gives him youth. But where did he get these photographs? The next day, he went to the management company again and asked to see the old documents for apartment number 48. He found a 1975 occupancy form. It said Andrei Viktorovich Sokolov, 25 years old, single, no children. He was registered with his parents, his father, Viktor Petrovich Sokolov, and his mother, Lydia Ivanovna Sokolova. Then he found death certificates for his parents. His father died in 1983. His mother in 1987. Both were buried in the old cemetery, the same one that was closed. I understood. Andrei Viktorovich worked as a photographer. Grandmother Vera had mentioned this once. He had an archive left thousands of photos of people he had photographed over the years. Many of them were already dead, and when his archive began to run out, he began collecting photographs from graves, staking them down from headstones at night. When no one was there, he was storing it in the chapel. He continued to feed on other people's memories. I decided to talk to him directly. I waited until evening. When he returned home, I knocked on his door. I didn't open it right away. I looked through the peephole, then pulled the chain door open. Yes, Andrei Viktorovich, can I talk? About what? About you. I know your secret. He froze. He stared for a long moment. Then he unhooked the chain and opened the door fully. Come in. The apartment was strange inside. Old furniture, Soviet, from the 70s. No modern technology. There were photographs on the walls, black and white, yellow. Dozens of photographs of strangers. Sit, he said, gesturing to the sofa. I sat down. He sat across from me, looking calmly. You were watching me. Yes. Did you see what I was doing in the chapel? Yes. He nodded. I see. What do you want? Tell everyone? Call the police? I want to understand. How does this work? Why don't you age? He sighed and leaned back in his chair. It's a long story. He'll tell you, but you have to promise not to tell anyone. Otherwise, he'll have to leave, and I don't want to. This is my home. He nodded. I promise. He began to tell his story. In 1975, when we moved into this house, I was 25. I worked as a photographer for the local newspaper. I photographed people, events, the life of the city. I loved my job. But then perestroika happened, the newspaper closed, and I was left without work. My parents died. I was left alone, penniless, jobless. I fell into ruin. I drank. I thought about suicide. One night in 1989, I came to the old cemetery. I wanted to commit suicide next to my parents' graves. I sat there, drinking vodka, crying, and suddenly I saw an old man. He was sitting on a bench near the chapel, looking at me. "Why did you come?" he asked. I told the truth. "To die." He nodded, paused, then said, "Don't rush. I'll show you something." He led me to the chapel. In the basement there lay the church archives, hundreds of photographs of deceased people. Previously, when a person was buried, the priest took their photograph for the funeral service. The photographs were stored in the archives for remembrance, for prayer. When the cemetery closed, the church was abandoned. The archives remained untouched. The old man picked up one photograph and showed it to me. "See, this is a man who lived. He had life, memories, emotions. All of this is preserved in this photograph. A person's image is a cast of their soul, and the soul is immortal. It does not disappear after death. It remains in images, in the memories of others, and if you know how, you can take it." He showed me a ritual, how to breathe in a special way, how to draw in an image from a photograph, how to draw in the last of the life force imprinted in it. I tried it, and it worked. I felt a surge of strength, energy, youth. The old man said, "Use this, live. Don't waste your life in vain." And then he disappeared. I never saw him again. Andrei fell silent. He asked, "Who was that old man?" He paused. "I don't know. I've thought about it a lot. Maybe he did this to once and decided to pass on the knowledge. Maybe it was a hallucination, I was drunk. Or maybe it was death itself deciding to play with me, giving me the illusion of immortality, only to take it all at once." He looked at me. "Since then, I've been doing this once a month. I come to the chapel, take photographs of the dead, take the images, and stay young. For almost 40 years. At first, I used the church archive. Then I started taking photographs from fresh graves when relatives left them on headstones. I took pictures at night, when no one was around. I've accumulated hundreds of them. I sat, digesting what I'd heard. Then I asked, "But this is their memory. You're stealing the memory of the dead." He shook his head. "No, I'm not stealing. I'm using what no one needs anymore. These people are dead. Their relatives have forgotten about them. The photographs lie abandoned. No one comes. I give them a second life. Through me, they continue to exist. That's wrong." He looked sadly. "Maybe, but I don't want to die. I've seen so many death's parents, friends, acquaintances. Everyone leaves, but I stay. And as long as there's a chance to stay, I will." He stood up. "I won't tell anyone. But stop this. Find another way to live." He smiled. "There's no other way. This is all I have." I left his apartment and went back to my own. I didn't sleep all night, thinking about our conversation. A week passed. I decided to take action. I went to the park during the day when Andrei was home. I cautiously approached the chapel, looked around, no one was there. I tore down the boards, went inside. I collected all the photographs, afraid he might show up. I took them out, hid them in my backpack, and left. I took the photographs to the church and told the priest I'd found them in an abandoned cemetery. I asked him to hold a memorial service for the inane dead. The priest agreed and held the service. Afterwards, I took the photographs to the active cemetery and buried them in a separate grave with a cross and a plaque reading "Unknown Departed." That night, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it. Andrei Viktorovich was standing there, his face pale and tired. I noticed the first wrinkles around his eyes, the gray in his hair. "You took the photographs," he croaked. "Without them, I'm getting old. In a few days, I'll be what I should be, and then I'll die. You should have died long ago. It's time." He looked at me with hatred, then turned and went back to his room. He closed the door. He wasn't mistaken. He was aging before my eyes with each passing day. Within a week, he had become a very old man. 10 days later, an ambulance took him away. He died 3 days later in the hospital. The doctors were shocked. They conducted an examination and took tests. The results showed that all his organs were worn out like those of a centenarian, but they couldn't explain how this had happened in 2 weeks. Ultimately, they wrote in the conclusion, "Adult progeria of a known etiology and extremely rare disease. Accelerated aging." No one investigated further. He was buried in the new cemetery. I came to the funeral. There were 3 of us. me, Grandma Vera, and Grandpa Fyodor. No one else. He lived to be 100, but died alone. I don't regret what I did, but sometimes at night I see his face aged, dying. I hear his voice, "You killed me." I wake up in a cold sweat. I tell myself, I did the right thing. He was stealing the memories of the dead. But doubts remain. Maybe I should have just left, not interfered. Maybe everyone has the right to choose how to live even if it's wrong. I don't know. I live with this burden, and I will live with it until the end. Now apartment 48 has been sold. A new family has moved in. Young, with a child. They live, laugh, enjoy life. That's how it should be. And I remember Andrei Viktorovich, a man who feared death so much that he was willing to steal images of the dead to prolong his life. But death came anyway. It comes to everyone, sooner or later.